Media Fact Checker. Amazon's jury duty hoax reality show and its second season, Company Retreat, featuring unsuspecting participants. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The first season of Jury Duty aired in 2023 on Freevee, owned by Amazon, and featured Ronald Gladden as the unsuspecting participant. Gladden received a $100,000 prize and a 2-year deal with Amazon after the reveal of the hoax in Season 1. Season 2, titled Company Retreat, was filmed at a 300,000 square foot site and involved 48 cameras filming across the location. Anthony Norman, a 25-year-old from Nashville, was the unsuspecting participant in Season 2, hired via Craigslist for a 2-week temp gig. Over 10,000 people applied for the Season 2 role, with applicants vetted for kindness, empathy, and charisma. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Norman's prize was still to be confirmed after the finale, while Article 2 explicitly states he received $150,000. Article 1 describes Norman's reactions as often sheer boredom, while Article 2 frames his responses as genuine and engaging, even highlighting his laughter at absurdities. Article 1 emphasizes the show's weird relationship to work and critiques corporate satire, whereas Article 2 focuses on the show's celebratory tone and genuine relationships. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Rising national security anxiety among Australians amid perceived threats and government preparedness gaps. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australian National University's National Security College report surveyed over 20,000 Australians between November 2024 and February 2026, including 480 interviews, 300 meetings, 8 focus groups, and 100 public submissions. In July 2025, 68% of Australians surveyed considered it more likely than not Australia would be involved in a foreign military conflict within 5 years. By February 2026, 72% of Australians rated domestic terrorism as a serious concern, up from 55% in November 2024, following the Bondi Beach terror attack on December 14, 2025. 45% of respondents in July 2025 believed a foreign military attack on Australia was probable or very likely within 5 years. 85 to 89% of respondents said climate change impacts, AI-enabled attacks, disinformation, foreign interference, economic crisis, and supply disruption were more likely than not to affect Australia in the next 5 years. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states a foreign military attack was rated the greatest concern, with 43% calling it major consequences and 36% catastrophic, but this specific breakdown is not mentioned in other sources. The ABC and Guardian both cite the 45% figure for foreign military attack likelihood, but only The Guardian explicitly ties this to major or catastrophic consequences without other sources confirming this distinction. The Guardian mentions the Middle East war's impact on oil shipments and supply disruptions, while other sources do not reference this specific geopolitical event's direct effect on Australia's energy security. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teen stabs woman in Melbourne shopping centre. Police arrest suspect on bail. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 25-year-old woman was stabbed while walking through M-City Shopping Centre on Blackburn Road, Clayton, around 7:30 to 7:50 am on Thursday, 7:30 am per ABC, 7:50 am per Thej. The victim was taken to the Alfred Hospital with upper body injuries and remained in a serious but stable condition on Thursday night. A 16-year-old boy was arrested shortly after the stabbing at a local medical centre in Clayton. The boy was charged with intentionally causing injury, recklessly causing injury, assaulting someone with a weapon, and possessing a controlled weapon. Thej only lists these. ABC does not specify charges but confirms arrest. The attacker allegedly randomly targeted a stranger and fled the scene after the stabbing. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the stabbing occurred at 7:30 a.m., while Thege reports it occurred at 7:50 a.m. Thege mentions the boy was charged with theft and committing an indictable offense while on bail, but ABC does not mention these charges. Thege states the boy was remanded in custody to appear at a children's court, but ABC does not mention the bail status or court appearance details. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia faces fuel shortages amid global supply disruptions and government responses. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Hundreds of service stations across Australia are running out of fuel, with 164 NSW stations without diesel and 289 missing at least one fuel type, Guardian ABC. Energy Minister Chris Bowen announced a 6-month relaxation of diesel standards, flashpoint lowered from 61.5 degrees Celsius to 60.5 degrees Celsius, to increase supply, Guardian ABC. 6 fuel shipments to Australia were cancelled in April, with some replaced by alternate sources, Guardian ABC. In Queensland, 55 stations lack diesel and 35 lack unleaded petrol, Guardian ABC. In Victoria, 162 stations have shortages of at least one fuel type, Guardian ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Guardian Article 1 states Bowen declined to share statistics for WA, NT, SA, and Tasmania, but ABC provides specific shortages for WA, 6 stations, and Tasmania, 1 diesel, 6 unleaded shortages. Guardian Article 1 reports Bowen said rationing is a long way off, while Guardian Article 2 implies urgency with warnings that Asian production could fall by a fifth in weeks. Guardian Article 1 mentions Bowen did not share details on 6 cancelled shipments beyond calling it an iterative process, while ABC confirms 6 shipments were cancelled in April with some replaced. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Pauline Hanson's One Nation surge benefiting Labour in Australian elections via electoral system dynamics. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Pauline Hanson stated it's just the start regarding One Nation's political momentum after the election. One Nation secured 20% of the vote in the election. Liberal Party vote collapsed to 19% as counting continued. Labour's vote remained stable at 39% despite Conservative fragmentation. The Greens increased their vote to 11%. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the 2 articles as they are nearly identical in content. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement negotiations and farmer opposition. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was finalised after 8 years of negotiations between Ursula von der Leyen, EU, and Anthony Albanese, Australia. The deal removes tariffs on 97.8% of Australian goods exported to the EU. Australian beef exports to the EU will increase by 30,600 tonnes annually under the agreement, ABC, 30,600, Newscomow, 35,000, corrected to 30,600 in ABC's later detail. Australian lamb exports to the EU will increase by 25,000 tonnes annually, ABC only. The agreement was announced on Tuesday, requiring parliamentary approval in both Australia and the EU. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports beef export increases of 30,600 tonnes annually, while Newscomow states 35,000 tonnes, 700% boost from current levels. ABC states lamb export increases of 25,000 tonnes, but Newscomow claims 31,000 tonnes, 5-fold increase. ABC cites NFF President Hamish McIntyre calling the deal the worst ever, while Newscomow does not attribute this exact phrasing but reports similar frustration over long-term quotas. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran conflict escalation and its economic political fallout for Trump ahead of midterms. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Petrol prices in the US have risen by over 80 cents per gallon since the start of the Iran conflict. The Trump administration coordinated the release of 400 million barrels of emergency oil stocks from the IEA's 32 member countries, the largest single release in IEA history. Over a quarter of the 400 million barrels came from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which holds federally owned crude oil in over 60 underground salt caverns along the U.S. Gulf Coast. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve's capacity is 700 million barrels, and it was reduced from 60% full to 45% full after the release. Brent crude price exceeded $104 per barrel as the Strait of Hormuz remained closed for the first time in modern history. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two articles as they are nearly identical in content. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia approves massive coal seam gas expansion in Queensland until 2081. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government approved up to 1,695 new gas wells in Queensland's Surrott and Bowen basins, valid until 2081. The Australia Pacific LNG, APLNG, project involves 1,545 kilometres of pipelines and 3 processing facilities across the Surrott and Bowen basins. APLNG is a joint venture between US firm ConocoPhillips, Australian energy company Origin, and Chinese operator Sinopec. The project is expected to operate until 2061, with an extended approval period to meet environmental conditions. The approval includes 120+ environmental conditions covering threatened species, vegetation clearing, and water resource protections. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 1,695 new wells and 120+ conditions, while The Guardian reports 1,695 wells but 126 conditions, no discrepancy in numbers, but ABC mentions 120+, while Guardian specifies 126. ABC states the approval is valid until 2081 with no mention of a 2061 operational end date, while The Guardian explicitly states the project will operate until 2061 with an extended approval period. The Guardian highlights the project's emissions as 120 million tonnes over its lifetime, including 9 million tonnes during construction, while ABC does not provide specific emissions figures. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrests and investigation into alleged Sydney kidnapping and murder of Chris Bagsarian. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Chris Bagsarian, an 85-year-old Armenian grandfather, was allegedly kidnapped from his North Ryde home on February 13 in a case of mistaken identity. His remains were found near a golf club in Pitt Town, northwest Sydney, on February 24, discovered after 11 days missing. 2 men, Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were charged with murder and kidnapping with intent to ransom on February 20. 2 additional suspects, a 23-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman, were arrested on March 13 during a search warrant at a Seven Hills property. Police released CCTV footage showing 3 men near a Dural property, alleged stronghold, on the night of the abduction. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the intended target was a relative of Dimitri Stepanyan, but Newskamau does not mention this detail. Newskamau claims the blue Hyundai was a 2017 model and was found burnt out at Glenbrook railway station, while ABC only refers to it as a blue car without specifying make or model. Newskamau reports the man was arrested in nothing but his underwear, but ABC does not mention this detail. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media fact checker. Federal judge blocks Pentagon's press access restrictions under Trump administration's policy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A federal judge, Paul Friedman, blocked key portions of the Pentagon's press access policy introduced in October 2025, ruling it unconstitutional under the First Amendment. The policy prohibited journalists from soliciting information the Pentagon did not directly provide and allowed credential revocation for non-compliance, with only one of 56 Pentagon Press Association outlets agreeing to sign the new policy. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth approved the policy change in October 2025, leading the Pentagon to assemble a new press corps consisting of pro-Trump outlets after major outlets refused to comply. The New York Times filed a lawsuit in Washington, D.C. federal court alleging the policy violated free speech protections and gave the Pentagon unfettered discretion to revoke passes. Judge Friedman's ruling cited the First Amendment's principle that the nation's security requires a free press and emphasized the public's right to information amid recent military actions in Venezuela and Iran. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian describes the Pentagon's new press corps as consisting of pro-Trump outlets and media personalities, while ABC does not specify the ideological slant of the new press corps beyond its composition after major outlets left. The Guardian quotes Judge Friedman's opinion as explicitly warning against abandoning the First Amendment's historical role in national security, while ABC does not reference this specific historical framing in the ruling. The Guardian highlights that Justice Department lawyers acknowledged the policy was partly subjective but claims they said credentialing decisions were neutral, whereas ABC omits the acknowledgement of subjectivity in the Justice Department's argument. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Severe flash flooding and dam failure risks in Hawaii's northern Oahu and Maui due to extreme rainfall. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Thousands of residents, over 4,000 to 5,500, were ordered to evacuate in northern Oahu, including Waialua and Halewa, due to flooding and dam risks. Guardian, ABC, Guardian. The Waihia Dam on Oahu, built in 1899, is at risk of imminent failure with water actively running over its spillway at 1,500 gallons per second. Guardian, ABC, Guardian. Emergency sirens and leave now orders were issued for areas downstream of the Waihia Dam on Friday morning. Guardian, ABC. The National Weather Service reported widespread life-threatening flash flooding in Halewa and Waialua, with northern Oahu under a flash flood warning. Guardian, ABC. A shelter at Waialua High and Intermediate School, with 185 people and 50 pets, was evacuated due to flooding and later relocated. Guardian, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, Guardian, reports evacuation orders for more than 4,000 people, while Article 3, Guardian, states 5,500 people were under evacuation orders. ABC states Maui County issued an asterisk evacuation advisory asterisk for Lahaina, but Article 3, Guardian, later describes this as an asterisk evacuation warning star. Article 1, Guardian, mentions the Waihia Dam spillway was discharging at 1,500 gallons per second, a figure not repeated in ABC or Article 3. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Possum found in Hobart Airport gift shop among plush toys. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A real possum was found nestled among plush toys in the gift shop at Hobart Airport on Wednesday morning. The possum was described as appearing calm by airport staff and a spokesperson. The possum was safely escorted out of the terminal by airport management without incident. Liam Bloomfield, multi-site manager with Lagardère AWPL at Hobart Airport, confirmed the incident. The possum wandered into the departures gift shop at approximately 11:45 a.m. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions the possum caused pandemonium when it left the shop, while The Guardian does not detail any disruption beyond the initial discovery. ABC describes the possum's entry as a mystery with redevelopment works as a possible explanation, but The Guardian does not mention this speculation. ABC emphasizes the mad rush of passengers filming and staff ensuring safety, while The Guardian focuses more on the discovery being delightful without detailing chaos. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ICE detains Canadian mother and autistic daughter in Texas despite valid documents. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tanya Warner, 47, and her 7-year-old autistic daughter Ayla Lucas are Canadian citizens detained by ICE in Texas since March 14, 2025. The family was stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint in Sarita, Texas, on March 14 while driving home from a baby shower in Raymondville. Tanya Warner holds a Texas driver's license, work visa, and a functional visa valid until 2030, according to Edward Warner and Amber Sinclair. Both mother and daughter were taken for fingerprinting at the checkpoint and did not return, per Edward Warner's statements to CTV News. The pair were initially held at the Rio Grande Valley Central Processing Center in McAllen, Texas, before being transferred to the Dilley Processing Center in South Texas. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the family was moved to Dilley early on Friday, March 15, but Article 2 does not specify the exact transfer timing. Article 1 mentions the family was held at Rio Grande Valley for poor conditions without detailing handcuffing children, while Article 2 explicitly states both mother and daughter were handcuffed there. Article 1 does not mention Ayla's full-body rash or Benadryl treatment, which Article 2 describes as a consequence of detention. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Testing and reviewing chef's knives for home cooks, focusing on performance, value, and care. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ben Lippitt tested 14 knives over a fortnight for The Guardian's knife review. The Wusthof Classic Chef Knife, 20 centimeters, was named the best overall chef's knife by both articles. The Victorinox Fibrox Chef's Knife, 20 centimeters, was identified as the best budget knife at £43. Helen Simmons, a knife specialist, advised against using knives on stones, bones, or frozen food. Knife specialist Helen Simmons recommended cleaning knives lightly under a tap and drying them immediately. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 does not mention the Sabatier cook's knife, 25 centimeters, as a top pick, while Article 2 ranks it as the best workhorse Western-style knife. Article 1 does not list the Blenheim Forge Santoku knife, 17.5 centimeters, as a top pick, while Article 2 ranks it as the best investment knife. Article 1 does not mention the Robert Welsh Signature cook's knife, 14 centimeters, as a top pick, while Article 2 ranks it as the best small chef's knife. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kangaroo Island Council's proposed feral cat eradication policy and progress. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kangaroo Island Council is considering a last cat policy to ban new pet cats from being introduced to the island as part of a feral cat eradication effort. Mayor Michael Pengelly stated the goal is to rid Kangaroo Island of feral cats and not allow any more cats in by 2030. The Dudley Peninsula project on Kangaroo Island has removed 2,800 feral cats, leaving around 150 remaining. Feral cats contribute to a $12 million annual decline in sheep production due to toxoplasmosis, according to Mayor Pengelly and Jack Goff. The federal government provided $1.61 million in December 2023 for the project, with the Invasive Species Council stating an additional $3.1 million is needed for full eradication. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the council's last cat policy is not that far advanced and would take up to 30 years to implement, while ABC describes it as an idea that the current council would like to see put in place without specifying its current stage. Newscomau mentions the council's eradication goal would make Kangaroo Island one of the world's biggest inhabited islands to be free of feral cats, but ABC does not explicitly state this phrasing. Newscomau includes the specific figure of $3.1 million needed to fully fund the largest feral cat removal project ever undertaken on an inhabited island, while ABC does not emphasize this phrasing but focuses on the $1.61 million and $800,000 funding announcements. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-led conflict escalation in Middle East and global response over Strait of Hormuz blockage. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. European leaders, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Japan issued a joint statement condemning Iran for attacks on commercial shipping vessels and civilian energy facilities, including the Strait of Hormuz closure. The joint statement called for an immediate comprehensive moratorium on attacks on civilian infrastructure, including oil and gas installations. Iran retaliated against an Israeli strike on its South Pars natural gas field by attacking a major Qatari LNG facility, Ras Laffan, in Qatar, causing 17% of Qatar's LNG export capacity to be eliminated, valued at $20 billion, 28 billion Australian dollars. Brent crude oil price briefly rose above $119 per barrel on Thursday due to escalating conflict. Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi visited Donald Trump at the White House, positioning Japan as a conduit between the US and allies in the Middle East. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources provided. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Trump orders ICE agents to US airports amid DHS funding shutdown and TSA staff shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to deploy ICE agents to US airports on Monday, the 24th of March, 2026, if Democrats did not agree to DHS funding terms, with deployment confirmed by Sunday, ABC, Guardian X3. Over 400 TSA workers have quit since the partial government shutdown began on the 14th of February, 2026, Guardian X2, ABC X2. TSA personnel are set to miss their second full paycheck on the 27th of March, 2026 due to the partial shutdown, Guardian X2, ABC. The partial government shutdown over DHS funding has entered its 36th day as of the 23rd of March, 2026, ABC X2, Guardian X2. ICE agents are not specifically trained for airport security, which is TSA's domain, Guardian X2, ABC X2. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Trump's original post claimed ICE would do security like no one has ever seen before, while ABC describes the deployment as a reckless threat to misuse ICE agents without proper training. The Guardian states Trump's deployment was conditional on Democrats not allowing just and proper security, while ABC frames it as a unilateral order already confirmed by Sunday. The Guardian mentions Trump's false claim that Somali immigrants have totally destroyed Minnesota, which ABC does not reference in the same context. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's waste sector faces diesel shortages threatening service disruptions and public health risks. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Waste Contractors and Recyclers Association of NSW chief Brett Lemon wrote a letter to the Federal Energy Minister about diesel shortages threatening garbage collection services. Queensland Waste Recycling Industry Association CEO Alison Price stated some members have received less than half their regular diesel allocations. WA Waste Management and Recycling Association Chief Mike Bobrowicz reported West Australian operators expect only about half their regular diesel allocations at next refill.
One NSW operator was informed they would receive only 12,000L of their regular fortnightly 50,000L diesel delivery, reported by both sources. Waste industry leaders are scheduled to meet with Assistant Environment Minister Josh Wilson in Canberra this week to discuss fuel supply issues. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. New studies on diet's role in dementia prevention, including the MIND diet and genetic variations affecting meat consumption. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The MIND diet, Mediterranean diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, is linked to lower risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia according to Harvard's breakdown and multiple studies. A 2024 Lancet Commission report identified 14 modifiable risk factors that could prevent or delay 45% of dementia cases, including high LDL cholesterol, 7%, hearing loss, 7%, depression, 3%, and low social contact in old age, 5%. The MIND diet includes leafy greens, nuts, berries, olive oil, and oily fish, with studies showing adherence correlates with reduced cognitive decline and preserved grey matter. An observational study found people adhering strongly to the MIND diet retained 20% more grey matter over 12 years, delaying brain aging by approximately 2.5 years. The APOE4 gene variant, present in about 25% of people, increases dementia risk and is referenced in studies examining dietary impacts on cognitive health. But not all outlets told the same story. Both sources repeat identical text verbatim, indicating no substantive contradictions between them. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian Muslims celebrate Eid and Nowruz amid Middle East war and rising Islamophobia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Eid al-Fitr and Nowruz celebrations are taking place in Australia this weekend, marking the end of Ramadan and the Persian New Year respectively. Heidelberg Mosque in Melbourne expects 1,500 worshippers for Eid prayers on Friday morning. Security at mosques has been increased due to concerns over Islamophobic incidents and potential threats. The 7th anniversary of the Christchurch massacre is being remembered during this year's Eid. Lokemba Mosque in Sydney anticipates 50,000 attendees for Eid prayers, requiring heightened security. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions the security at Heidelberg Mosque is stepped up due to Islamophobic incidents and the Christchurch massacre anniversary, while SBS does not provide specific details about the reasons for increased security. The Guardian explicitly states that Lokemba Mosque security is at a level not seen since the 2005 Cronulla riots, but SBS does not mention this specific comparison. The Guardian provides specific quotes from Gamal Kir about politicians normalizing Islamophobia, while SBS does not include this political commentary. This story was covered by The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland Government appoints former police officer Darren Robinson to Legal Aid Board amid Palm Island controversy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Darren Robinson was a former Queensland Police Service officer, senior sergeant, who investigated a complaint against Christopher Hurley in 2004, ruling it fictitious. A 2005 coronial inquest described Robinson's investigation as superficial, biased and misleading and found his conclusion was dishonest and flew in the face of objective evidence. The Crime and Misconduct Commission recommended Robinson be disciplined alongside 3 other officers in 2015, but no disciplinary action was taken. Robinson was part of a police team sent to Palm Island in 2004 to investigate the death in custody of Murungi Dumaji and later accompanied tactical police on raids after the island's police station was burned down.
Robinson was admitted to practice as a solicitor in 2014 and is now a Townsville-based lawyer appointed to the Legal Aid Queensland Board by Attorney General Deb Frecklington in February 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Robinson was appointed as part of a team of police sent to Palm Island to investigate Dumagi's death in 2004, while Article 2 clarifies he was a friend of Christopher Hurley and investigated a prior complaint against him before the death. Article 1 does not mention Robinson being awarded the Queensland Police Valour Award, while Article 2 explicitly states he received this award. Article 1 does not reference Justice Mortimer's 2015 ruling on Robinson's conduct, while Article 2 details his findings on harassment and biased policing. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland police shoot man with alleged knife threats in Logan Central Shopping Centre. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A man in his 30s was shot by police in Logan Central, Brisbane, on Saturday around 6 p.m. The incident occurred at Carmody Centre on Ewing Road, near Carmody Street, Logan Central. Police allege the man approached them with a knife after reports of an armed individual making threats. The man was shot in the abdomen and taken to Princess Alexandra Hospital, where he remains in a stable condition. Police provided first aid at the scene before transporting the man to hospital. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC says the man is in his 30s while Newscomau states he is 27 years old. ABC mentions police attempted to negotiate with the man before he approached with the weapon, which is not explicitly stated in Newscomau. ABC specifies the exact location as Carmody Centre on Ewing Road, near Carmody Street, while Newscomau only mentions Logan Central without street details. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's Pearl Harbor joke during a White House meeting with Japan's PM Sonai Takeichi. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump joked about Japan's 1941 Pearl Harbor attack during a White House press conference on December 7, 2023, saying we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? The Japanese Prime Minister Sonai Takeichi visibly reacted with discomfort, shifting in her seat and widening her eyes during Trump's remark. The Pearl Harbor attack killed 2,390 Americans and led to the U.S. declaring war on Japan the next day, December 8, 1941. Trump previously made a similar quip about D-Day in June 2023 during a meeting with Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz, calling it not a pleasant day for you. Japan's constitution bans the use of force except for self-defense, limiting its military involvement in conflicts like the Iran War. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Trump's tone toward Takeichi was far more friendly than toward European leaders, while SMH describes Trump as peeved and focused on Iran despite Takeichi's Indo-Pacific priorities. The Guardian implies Trump's remark was an off-the-cuff joke, but ABC frames it as a deliberate parallel to Japan's Pearl Harbor attack. ABC states Trump later said Japan's help in the Strait of Hormuz was not needed, while SMH emphasizes Japan's potential contributions, e.g., minesweepers, are critical for long-term security. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israel's strike on Iran's South Pars gas field and Iran's retaliatory attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Israel bombed Iranian facilities linked to the South Pars gas field, the largest natural gas field in the world, shared with Qatar, ABC, Guardian, ABC, Guardian, ABC, Guardian, 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 Guardian. Iran retaliated by launching strikes on Qatar's Ras Laffan gas complex, causing extensive damage and knocking out about 17%, or 12.8 tons year, of its LNG export capacity, ABC, Guardian, Guardian, ABC, Guardian, Guardian, Guardian. QatarEnergy estimated $20 billion in damage to Ras Laffan and repairs could take 3 to 5 years. ABC, Guardian. Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned that Saudi Arabia's Samref refinery, Yanbu, UAE's Al Hosn gas field, and Qatar's Mesaieed petrochemical complex were direct and legitimate targets. Guardian. Iran's strikes also hit Saudi Arabia's Samref refinery, near Yanbu, Kuwait's Mina al-Amodi and Mina Abdullah refineries, and UAE's Habshan gas processing facility. Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC both report Trump claimed he knew nothing about the South Pars attack, but Israeli officials in ABC and Guardian sources dispute this, stating the US was informed. The Guardian reports Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned Iran in bellicose language, while Trump himself later said he had told Netanyahu not to attack Iranian gas fields again. ABC and Guardian. The Guardian notes Trump's Treasury Secretary suggested lifting sanctions on Iranian cargoes at sea, which is not mentioned in ABC sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicola Oleslages finishes as silver medalist in women's high jump at World Indoor Championships in Poland. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicola Oleslages won silver in the women's high jump at the World Athletics Indoor Championships in Torun, Poland. Yaroslava Mahuchik won gold in the women's high jump with a clearance of 2.01 meters. Oleslages, Yulia Levchenko, Ukraine, and Angelina Topic, Serbia, shared silver after all clearing 1.99 meters on their first attempt. Oleslages cleared 1.99 meters, equaling her indoor personal best. Eleanor Patterson, Australia, finished 7th with a clearance of 1.93 meters. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Hayley Kitching's 800m heat time as 2 minutes and 0.99 seconds, while ABC reports it as 2 minutes and 0.09 seconds. The Guardian mentions Jess Hull's 1500m heat time as 4 minutes and 12.45 seconds but does not mention her advancing to the final, while ABC confirms her advancement with the same time. The Guardian notes Adam Spencer advanced to the men's 1,500-meter final with a time of 3 minutes and 40.79 seconds, but this detail is missing in ABC. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Legal dispute between Kyle Sandilands and ARN Media over $100 million contract termination. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kyle Sandilands filed legal action in the federal court against ARN Media on March 1, 2025, claiming his $100 million contract was invalid due to no serious misconduct or breach of contract. ARN Media terminated Sandilands' contract on February 27, 2025, following an on-air argument between Sandilands and Jackie O. Henderson on February 20, 2025. ARN Media also terminated Jackie O. Henderson's $100 million contract, with Henderson denying she resigned or quit the show. The on-air argument involved Sandilands calling Henderson off with the fairies and criticizing her work ethic, leading to Henderson accusing him of an attack. ARN Media's share price fell to under $100 million in March 2025, down nearly 70% since 2023, with revenue and profits declining significantly. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC both report ARN Media terminated Henderson's contract first, but News Corp Australia states Henderson's contract was terminated 2 weeks before Sandilands. Employment lawyer Faye Calderone, ABC, suggests ARN Media acted prematurely and opportunistically, while ARN Media's ASX statement, Guardian ABC, claims the termination was justified due to serious misconduct. Henderson denies ever resigning or quitting the show, ABC, News Corp Australia, but ARN Media's March 3 ASX statement, ABC, claims she gave notice she cannot continue to work with Mr. Sandilands. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia warns Israel against occupying southern Lebanon amid escalating conflict with Hezbollah. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong called Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar on March 12 to 13 to warn against an Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, stating Australia supports Lebanon's sovereignty. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz announced plans to create a security zone between the Israeli border, Blue Line, and the Litani River in southern Lebanon. Over 1,000 Lebanese civilians have been killed since Israel began striking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including more than 100 children and 40 medics, Lebanon's health ministry figures. More than 1 million Lebanese civilians have been displaced due to the conflict in southern Lebanon. Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong condemned Iranian weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz and its impact on global fuel prices. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Newscomau report that over 1,000 Lebanese civilians have died, but The Guardian does not specify the exact number beyond more than 1,000. ABC states that Lebanon's health ministry does not distinguish between civilian and combatant casualties, while Newscomau and Guardian do not clarify this distinction in their reporting. ABC reports that 2 Israeli soldiers and 1 civilian were killed in Lebanon, including one by misfired Israeli artillery, but Newscomau and Guardian do not mention the civilian death from misfired artillery. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.